Hi, everyone. Welcome to Deep Dive, Hunger Doesn't Take a Vacation, Summer Nutrition Status Report Findings, hosted by the Food Research and Action Center. I'm Steve Hayward, Communications Manager at FRAC. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few brief housekeeping items. We expect this webinar to run about 30 minutes. We are recording the presentation and will send the recording and slides in a follow-up email. Closed captioning is available. To turn captions on, select Show Captions in the bottom taskbar and choose English as the spoken language. We'll have time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. To ask a question at any time during the webinar, please use the Q&A tab in the bottom taskbar. With that, I'll pass it off to Kelsey Boone, Senior Child Nutrition Policy Analyst at FRAC. Take it away, Kelsey.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Hope everyone is doing well. As Steve said, this is our deep dive into our summer nutrition status report. And so we'll start with our agenda really quickly. We're going to be looking at the summer landscape as well as the methodology that went into making this report. Then we'll delve a little bit into the report findings and recommendations based on those findings. And then we'll touch briefly on some FRAC resources before we open it up for Q&A. So what happens during the summer months? So during the summer months, students lose access to school meals, and students rely on free and reduced price school breakfast and lunch during the school year will lose access. So the rates of food insecurity and food insufficiency among children is higher in the summer. And children are more vulnerable to accelerated weight gain, increases in body mass index, and obesity during the summer months. While some summer learning loss is common, research shows that it disproportionately impacts low-income students and students in later grades. The positive thing is most summer nutrition sites offer educational or enrichment activities to counterbalance this learning loss. So to create this report, we first requested data from USDA on the total number of breakfasts and lunches served through the Summer Food Service Program, site and sponsor data and average daily participation in the National School Lunch Program or the Seamless Summer option. For the Summer Food Service Program data, we calculated average daily participation by dividing the number of meals served by the number of operating days in July 2023, which is all weekdays minus the 4th of July holiday. We also set a participation goal of 40 children receiving a summer lunch per 100 who participated in free or reduced price school lunch during the school year. And finally, we calculated the dollar amount that states missed out on by not reaching the participation goal of 40 to 100. The key findings in this report are that just over 2.8 million children participated in the summer nutrition programs on an average day in July of 2023. We do look at July as opposed to June or August, as it is the month that most sponsors are serving meals as schools let out and start at different times during the summer. That's why we tend to use July data. The participation in summer lunch decreased by 5.7% in July of 2023 compared to July of 2022. So we did see a decrease. And participation in lunch in July of 2023 was slightly higher than pre-pandemic levels, with only 30,533 additional children participating in July of 2023 when compared to July of 2019, which is the last summer before the pandemic began. So this next chart shows the total lunches served in July throughout the years 2019, and then we jump to 2022, which is last year, and 2020, or the last year before this report, and then 2023, which was last summer. So as you can see, there was a major jump in lunches served in 2022. That is in part because we still had waivers, even though the waivers were out later in the summer. Those waivers took place or started or were approved at the end of June of 2022, which allowed sponsors to still utilize them for summer feeding. Last summer was the first summer that we saw that we saw there was there were no waivers available. Next slide. So the number of summer food service program sponsors and sites increased from July 2022 to July of 2023. Nationally, 4,671 sponsors, which is an increase of 119 sponsors over 2022, and 35,578 sites, which is an increase of 21 sites from 2022, participated in July of 2023. The number of summer food service program sponsors and sites operating in July of 2023 was lower than that of pre-pandemic levels. So when comparing July of 2023 and July 2019, there was a decrease of 876 sponsors and 11,967 sites. So these numbers, when comparing last year to this year, aren't very different. You can see that the bars are about the same for sponsors and sites in 2022 and 2023, but it still is a decrease over the number of sites and sponsors that were operating before the pandemic began, which is a indicator that we need to focus on retaining sponsors and increasing numbers of sites. Next slide. So we only had one state that met the goal that I mentioned previously of reaching 40 children per eating a summer lunch per 100 that participate in free or reduced price school meals during the National School Lunch Program. And that state was Vermont. Vermont was able to reach 54.4 children to 100 in NSLP, which was a very exciting goal that they met. The other top performers included New Mexico, Maine, Montana, New Jersey, and New York. Next slide. So why was there a drop? As I said before, this is the first summer that operated without nationwide waivers during the pandemic. And so that meant that flexibilities such as parent pickup and allowing sites to operate in every community, not just the ones that meet area eligibility, were no longer flexibilities that could be used. The only option that was available last summer was a version of rural non-congregate, which allowed for royally designated areas to serve meals in a non-congregate way. It wasn't until this year that non-congregate designation for rural, or the rural definition under USDA actually expanded this year under the IFR or the interim final rule for summer EBT and rural non-congregate. So we do expect those numbers of students who are able to be fed under that to expand this year. And also last year, many summer programs and meal sponsors were still facing staffing shortages, which have continued throughout the pandemic. Next slide. All right, and so we're going to look ahead to some policy recommendations as well as programmatic recommendations. Next slide. So we're going to, the policy recommendations that we put forward in the report are to lower the area eligibility threshold. So lowering the eligibility threshold from where it is at 50% to 40%, or setting an even lower threshold, could allow more communities to serve children whose families are struggling and would improve access to summer meals in every state. The 50% threshold for participation keeps many communities where poverty is concentrated, such as rural and suburban areas, from participating. The next is to streamline summer food service program and the after-school meals program. So many sites that operate the summer food service program also serve meals after school during the school year through the Child and Adult Care Food Program, or CACFP. By allowing SFSP sponsors to operate year-round, we can encourage overall program retention, as well as eliminate duplicative and burdensome paperwork while supporting sponsors' efforts to serve more children in their community. Currently, sponsors must apply for and operate 2 separate programs despite the fact that they often serve the same children. The next is to allow all summer meal sites to serve 3 meals. Allowing all summer sites to serve 3 meals would align summer with the school year, when children can receive breakfast and lunch at school and a supper and snack at an after-school program. Presently, most sites can only provide a maximum of 2 meals per day. And finally, the last policy recommendation is to permanently increase federal funding for summer and after-school programs, which can help ensure that all children have access to nutritious meals and high-quality programming that they need during the summer, as well as after school. Next slide. So some programmatic opportunities include leveraging summer learning funding. The American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 included $30 billion in funding that could be used to support summer and after-school meal programs. By making this historic increased investment into federal after-school and summer program funding, more families with low incomes will have access to the enrichment and education programs that provide an important foundation for summer meals. This is the last year for states to distribute the funding, and many states still have dollars on the table. Next is to engage governors and elected officials. So governors and elected officials can play a critical role in establishing and strengthening statewide summer meal expansion efforts. For example, governors can work with the state agency to set expansion goals, create a statewide summer meal work group, and help raise awareness about the availability of summer meals. This will be especially important as states utilize federal funding for the rollout of the new summer EBT program and the rural non-congregate option. The final programmatic opportunity I want to touch on is supporting and retaining sponsors and sites. As we saw in the data, there was a large drop from pre-pandemic in the number of sponsors and sites. And even though they increased in 2023, we still want to help ensure that they continue to participate, and state agencies and advocates can help with outreach and promotion. And they can also survey and connect with sponsors to provide additional support to overcome challenges and identify opportunities for growth. Additional programs were established in the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2022, and those have rolled out this summer. So I just want to touch on those real quick, as they will be impacting the report for next year, or they will be part of the overall summer strategy that we will touch on next year in our reports. So in addition to congregate meal sites, states have 2 other programs to feed hungry children. And they are the Summer EBT or Sunbucks program and the Rural Non-Congregate or the Sun Meals to Go program. Summer EBT provides a grocery benefit on an EBT card for children to purchase food during the summer months. And Rural Non-Congregate allows for areas designated as rural to serve meals that can be consumed off-site. Both of these programs are designed to work in tandem with the existing summer meals programs and create the strongest nutrition safety net for children during the summer months. And we look forward to the rollout of both of those programs and seeing how they support the traditional summer meals programs. So the link will be sent out to the summer nutrition report in the follow-up email that will be sent. And there's also a link on this slide for the summer food resources that we have. Great, and now we will turn to questions and answers. So the first question is, am I correct that there was a significant reduction in the number of sponsors and sites between 2019 and 2023? However, more meals were served in 2023. I assume that means over 2019. So yes, there were slightly more meals that were served in 2023 than 2019. And yes, there was a significant reduction in sponsors and sites. So there's some really interesting data trends there that we look forward to continuing to watch and see how sponsors and sites are continuing to operate. So what are some programmatic strategies to use this data for advocacy? using the statewide data is really helpful to show where your participation levels are and where maybe they could be. And there is a, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yes, so you can use the participation data trends from over the last few years in order to show where the summer meal programs were whenever all the flexibilities were in place and where they are now. It can be really helpful to have this data for both strengthening summer meal programs, especially since most states have seen a drop over pre-pandemic operations, as well as advocacy around summer ABT, where you can use that data to point to how the summer EBT program is desperately needed for the summer to support children during summer meals. Were there differences in meals served in rural versus urban, also SFAs versus other NGOs? So we do not have that data breakdown at our fingertips. That is something that we can look into. It would depend on what data sets USDA has available. The next question is, not sure if I read this correctly, but are some states opting out of summer EBT and why? So yes, some states have been opting out of summer EBT. And there are many reasons why, some of which revolve around the challenges that came up with the timeline for summer EBT this year, as well as the administrative funding match. So, with those challenges, we have been working with a bunch of anti-hunger advocates, and we continue to push on states to find ways to adopt the program going into 2025. Why not include a policy recommendation to allow non-congregate meals in all areas, not just rural? So while we really were excited to ensure that all students had access during the pandemic through non-congregate meals, FRAC really sees congregate meals as a really important piece of the puzzle. So the enrichment and education components that come with the congregate sites are really vital to keeping children educated, as well as keeping them socialized during the summer months whenever they're not around their peers. So we really see those congregate sites as very important. And that's kind of one of the reasons that we support access in rural areas where barriers are very great, and in areas where school meal sites or meal sites make sense. We really do encourage that congregate option. Some of these are wonderful questions, and I will, if there are some that I do not know the answer to off the top of my head, we will make sure that we include answers in our follow-up email. As far as states that have opted out of summer EBT, there are a list of 13 states. If you visit our website at frac.org/summer-EBT and click on the families link, there is a map there that shows which states have opted out. So that might be easier than me reciting them off of the top of my head. Thank you, Steve, for putting that in the chat. Is there or will there be data on how many meals were served in 2024 utilizing ship to home and parent pickup? I do not know that. I am unsure of what data is going to be required through the non-congregate option and in what way that data will be broken down. So stay tuned for that. We're not sure what that's going to look like whenever it comes through, since this is the first summer of full implementation of that. Any other questions? For the questions on insights on streamlining CACFP and SFSP, our suggestion is to allow sponsors who run after school programs to, like I said, to run the programs through SFSP during the school year. We are unsure. I mean, we have brought this up to USDA, but we are not yet. They haven't moved forward on anything around that. So again, to stay tuned to that one. Great. Any other questions? What can be shared with other states so that they reach the percentage served, like Vermont, New Mexico, et cetera? Is there best practices that can be implemented? So as part of our summer meal series every year, which is a webinar series, we do go through some of the best practices to increase participation. And I am sure that will be up as well. Those are on our YouTube as well, which are the old webinars. And then every year we do a summer food series in the spring. So stay tuned for those webinars coming up early next year. But the best practices, we have lots of resources on our website, which can be found at the link on the slide about summer food and how to best expand the programs. How can we go about making potential summer food service programs, sites, and sponsors more interested in participating? We have low rural rates here. There are practices that you can do to entice. Most of them tend to come at the state level with investment in the program. So, state engagement is really vital in moving your programs forward. Not just funding, but also working with sites and sponsors to make the program as easy as possible to implement and not putting up any additional barriers. So my first thought on that is to talk to your state agencies, talk to your sites and sponsors that are already working, talk to your state agencies and see where they are with working with their state agency and what barriers can be reduced to move forward with the program. Right. Any last questions? Great. Well, if you do have any questions that are outstanding, happy to answer via email at kboone@frac.org. And also happy to touch base outside of email if that is helpful to anyone. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you so much, and we'll see you all soon.